Lurking in the night. The waxing moon illuminates the land beneath it. It makes the forest seem less terrifying, but it still makes people a bit uneasy nonetheless. In the vast land of tall pine trees is an unknown person, or at least, that's what everyone assumes. Nobody has ever gotten a good look at them. If anybody ever catches a glimpse of their silhouette, they're considered lucky. But as soon as anyone tries to look again, it's gone. This mysterious figure tends to not stay in one spot for too long. They always lurk in the darkness that the night brings. Everyone would always say, keep an eye open at night. Not everyone you meet will be friendly. Vex certainly falls under that category. Believe it or not, he's the person that everyone talks about. And he's not exactly a person. Rather, he's a vampire. Which would make sense as to why his lurking grounds are in the forest. Forests have trees, many trees, and trees provide shade. Shade that keeps him out of the sun. Now, as for his reasons of never sticking around one spot for too long, that is because he chooses to look over all the inhabitants of the forest. He makes sure that nothing is there to bother or harm them. He thinks of the forest as his home, and all that visit it are under his protection. And if anyone ever spots him, well, he flees the scene as quickly as he can arrive. Even as that saying goes, he's not entirely bad. One will simply have to get to know him first. Tonight, it's not any different. Woo! Camping! 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 A young boy chants. Now, little cub. Keep your voice down. You might attract monsters. You might attract monsters to our little campsite. An older man warns. Must be the dad. Yeah, Bear? A little girl adds. And you know what happens when I get scared? You don't have to remind me, Arya. Bear reprimands, crossing his arms. Aw, cut it out, the two of you. A woman speaks up. We're almost there. Just a little more walking, Fine, Bear replies. As the family makes their way to the clearing, the sound of their footsteps reaches Vex's ears. He sits on a hill, turning his head in the direction of the approaching family. He stands up from where he is and goes to do what he always does, creep around in the trees. Once the family reaches their destination, the parents set down their bags and begin to set up their campsite. Although, even if Bear and Arya are still close to them, they seem to be getting lost in their little chasing game. They end up chasing each other into the forest. Vex tries his best to remain out of the kids' vision as he silently watches them play with each other. He shifts his gaze over to the parents who have now finished setting up the tents for them to rest. The mother glances around the clearing in search for the kids. Bear, Arya! Where are you two? The father, too, looks around for their little cubs. We have the tents set up. I think it's time for us to go to sleep. The children are caught laughing for a good while as they lay on the grass exhausted from their chase. You really tired me out, you little devil. Bear says to Arya, still breathing a little erratically. You thought you could catch me, you really did. She replied, breathing the same as him. She then sits up, hearing their parents' voices. Hey, I think Mom and Dad are calling. We should head back then. Come on. Bear sits up after her, then stands up and offers her a hand. Arya takes his hand and stands up as the two walk back to the clearing where their parents are. As soon as they come back, the mother glances in their direction and she hurries over to them, wrapping her arms around Bear in a firm embrace. Where were you two? She asked worriedly. The father, too, glances in their direction and picks up Arya, hugging her as well. You had us worried there for a moment, the father adds. You two could have gotten lost. Oh, don't worry so much, Bear says reassuringly. It's our job to worry, my dear. We're your parents, the mother says. That's right. And it's also our job to protect you while in this forest. Right. Bear trails off, wrapping his arms around the mother in return. Vex looks at the family from a distance with an unreadable expression. It's hard to tell what he is feeling, whether it be contentment, jealousy, or something else completely. He continues to keep an eye on them in case something were bound to happen. Now, we should really be getting to rest if we want to have a full day to ourselves tomorrow, Mom recommends. Aww, but I wanted to tell stories around the campfire, Arya complains, pouting slightly. The father giggles. Well, one can't exactly say no to that, right, sweetheart? He glances over at Mom as she crosses her arms. I guess we can. Okay, Mom agrees. Now, why don't you two run along and gather some branches so that we can make a campfire? Yeah, come on, Bear! Arya giggles as she runs off into the forest, expecting him to run after her. Hey, wait up! I have to look after you! Bear shouts as he follows after her. Vex looks towards the running children once more as he follows close behind them, while remaining hidden and discreet in his movements. He stays within the depths of the forest, observing the kids as they look around for any tree sticks on the ground. He perks up slightly when he hears Arya speaking to Bear as she picks up some branches from the ground. He even has the faintest of smiles to spread across his face. However, that does not distract him from what he feels is necessary to do. Those protect all those who come across his stomping grounds. Here, look! There's some more over here! Arya points out as she jogs over to the sticks and picks them up. You look like you're carrying too much. Want some help? Bear asks. No, I'm big and strong. I can handle it, she replies. Besides, I think that this is enough. Whatever you say, he says. Vex continues to watch them as they return to the campsite, and he shifts his gaze to the grass at his feet. He looks back again, and he sees how content the mother looks and how happy Arya seems to be. It brought a very small smile to his face, although he sensed something was off. He heard some rustling in the bushes near the campsite, and he was pretty sure that they heard it too. What was that, Dad? Bear asks, sounding a little uncertain. Maybe we should save campfire stories for tomorrow, he remarks. He then looks at Arya and pats her head a little. Sorry, sweetie. Aww, she pouts, but then she sets down the pile of branches down so that it would be there tomorrow. Better safe than sorry, Arya, the mother adds. Now, come. Let's get some sleep. As Vex watches the mother gesture the kids into the tents, they follow her instructions and head inside. The parents follow behind them as they zip the tent up and get ready to rest. He continues to keep an eye on the clearing, trying to find whatever made that rustling noise. Once he is sure that the family is sleeping, he steps out of the depths of the forest and approaches the clearing. He perches on a nearby rock, getting on a knee and keeping his gaze in the direction that the sound came from. He contemplates for a moment as he closes his eyes and let his mind run wild. Then, his eyes snap open at the same rustling sound that had occurred earlier. It sounded closer, as if it were closing in on the campsite. He narrowed his eyes as his gaze shifted towards a silhouette of someone in the forest. What fully got his attention was the item that the figure was holding. It looked like a weapon of some sorts. His eyebrows furrowed, and he stared daggers at the object in their hands, as if it was the bane of his existence. He then moved back into the depths of the forest, but his gaze remained on the figure and what they intended to do with that weapon. He would act upon the situation if he so needed to. Within a moment of watching the mysterious person, the minute Vex saw them lift their weapon slightly, he clenched his hands into fists, He dashed towards them immediately, tackling them and pushing them down. The person stabbed his shoulder, but he showed no reaction, even as blood slowly began to seep from the wound. He grabbed them by the collar and stood up, lifting them slightly off the ground. He held them up for a moment with his hand. Then he went and bit their neck, sinking his fangs into it. He drank the blood from them as if his thirst hadn't been quenched in a long while, and he heard their weapon fall to the ground. When he was done, he leaned back and let go of them as they dropped to their knees. They then fell forward, collapsing and lying unconscious on the grass. The commotion seemed to have awakened Bear. Doing his best not to wake his family up, he slowly unzipped the tent and crawled out. He stood up and began looking around to see what was making all that noise, until he caught a glimpse of Vex. Vex wiped his mouth with his sleeve, a bit of blood still on his face. Bear didn't know how to feel, and Vex didn't even know he was being watched. "Hey!" Bear called out to Vex. As soon as Vex heard the sound of Bear's voice, he turned tail and ran back into the deep, dark forest. Bear wanted to go after him, but he was stopped by a voice. "Bear, why are you awake?" Mom said as she walked out of the tent, placing her hands on his shoulders. "I saw something. I think it was the strange person everyone talks about. And he's not just a person, I think he's a vampire. I saw blood on his mouth." "Sweetheart, are you imagining things?" Mother asks as she raised a hand to pat his head a few times. "Mom, please, I swear I saw him. He's real." Bear pleads as he turns to look up at her. "Please, believe me." "Bear," she sighs as she looks down at him. "I think you're a little tired. You need to go back in. Get some sleep. All right?" Bear glances at where Vex used to be one last time. Then he lowers his head and nods slowly. "Yes, Mom," he says, a little disappointed. Good." She then leads him back inside the tent and zips the exit closed once more. Vex returned to the hill he sat upon a few moments ago, seemingly in thought. He was lucky that Bear's mom didn't entirely believe what he claimed to see. He wiped the rest of the blood from his mouth and grasped the wound on his shoulder. Blood still seeped from the wound, but it didn't seem to affect him in the slightest. He then walked off, heading over to where he rests, which is a small cabin. He closes the door behind him and reaches for a bag. He takes out a cloth, disinfectant, and a bandage to wrap around his wound. He pours some disinfectant onto the cloth and dabs it on the wound a bit, cleaning it up. It stings a little bit, but he continues to clean his wound regardless. It wasn't the first time he had to do this to himself. After cleaning it, he wrapped the bandage around his shoulder and sat there for a few minutes, letting the moment sink in. He then put everything back into the bag and set it aside on the floor. He grasped his shoulder once more, and he looked out the window, staring in the direction of the family's campsite. He averted his gaze and stared down at himself. He grumbled to himself slightly. Then he sat back down on his bed, glancing up at the ceiling in contemplation once more.